Warfare's crossplay beta weekend has kicked off, so you can now jump in on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, or PC, assuming you're a part of that early access period. It opens up to everybody as of tomorrow, but everybody's starting to get their hands on now with this. So with more people starting to experience it all, with everybody starting to play around with all their loadouts, I figured we'd put out a video talking about what I think are 10 of the best attachments here to utilize on your weapons. Now, one thing to bear in mind before I jump into any of this is that not all attachments are universal. You're not going to find one attachment that we'll talk about with the MP5 today that you will find on the M4. They just don't necessarily always transfer one-to-one. So these will be very situational in some cases, some will be more universal than others, but wanted to share with you guys what I think are some of the best attachments to put in your weapon loadout. So that said, let's jump into it. Let's start with some attachments for those that are wanting to move around the map and get a little bit mobile with their play setup. And you could say run and gun if you want, but you can also play a little passively if you need to, if you're, say, holding down the headquarters or locking down a flag in domination. But one of the big things that I've been running as of late is one of my favorite attachments thus far, that being the 10mm mag for the MP5. Now, first things first, the MP5 is an absolute melt machine to begin with, but when you add this into the equation, when you take a look at the 10mm auto ammunition in the magazine section of the weapon loadouts, this is something that will offer 10mm auto ammo, obviously, since you're changing out the rounds in your weapon, but it also grants you extra damage, with the cost of then sacrificing a little bit in the fire rates and the aiming recoil control. So when we talk about the MP5 already being a weapon that can shred, when you add more damage onto that, that's pretty impressive, and you're not really sacrificing all that much. The MP5 has a very controllable fire rate to begin with, and then you knock it down just a slight peg, it's not terrible, and the aiming recoil control can be very easily mitigated with any sort of grip on the weapon. So you're really not sacrificing all that much for what feels like a significant boost in that damage, so I definitely recommend throwing this one on. Now, staying a little in line here with what works with the MP5, this one actually is on other weapons, but it doesn't do exactly the same here as an SMG would. But that said, we end up seeing the lightweight barrel as one that I very much so enjoy as of late. It adds a little bit more to that aim down sight speed, meaning that you can look down your sights a little quicker, which is of course huge in a lot of gunfights, only sacrificing a little bit of the bullet velocity. Now, this is on things also like your M4A1, but this is also a little bit bugged, it seems like, in the rifle category. It ends up saying that it sacrifices your muzzle velocity in those categories, even though it showcases as a pro for what you'd end up getting out of that. So bear that in mind that some of the details aren't exactly accurate, but with a lightweight barrel, it adds a little bit more to that mobile play style. And also, of course, aiming down sight is, I think, one of the big things that I try to mitigate in my loadouts so that I can have the leg up in a gunfight. So definitely something I'd recommend. Another attachment for a more mobile setup is that of the stippled pistol grip. Now, if you're a first timer to customizing your weapon loadout here within Modern Warfare, you may have flashbacks to pistol grips in, say, World War II, where you think, well, that's kind of useless. But this time around, they actually do something and can help your loadout. The stippled pistol grip allows you to have an increased ADS speed and as well a sprint to fire speed, meaning your sprint out time is better than the base default with that. So both of those helping you get your weapon up and in a gunfight faster than the base default variation of it, which can help in every scenario, either coming from a sprint or just already being idle or having the ADS. It helps both situations, which is fantastic, and it only comes with a little sacrifice to the idle sway control, which, truth be told, you're probably not going to be idle all that much if you're using a run and gun class setup or something that is even remotely built for mobility. After that, I want to talk about the short barrel, a weapon attachment that is on a few different weapons if I'm not mistaken, but it is one that I used primarily on my M4A1, and it's one that I think is very effective in that role. It ends up having a double emphasis in the positive for an aim down sight speed, meaning you get your weapon up faster, and it also increases that movement speed as well. The cons and what you trade off for that is a double negative on the bullet velocity and also a slight recoil control penalty. So realistically, again, if you're trying to create a weapon class setup, at least especially for that M4A1, which seems to be one of the most powerful weapons outside of, say, the FAMAS, you can one burst with that one. The MP5 is up there as well. But in terms of rifles, I found the M4A1 was not only the most powerful, but most versatile. And with a short barrel, you can end up playing a little more mobile than you'd necessarily have to with it bare as a default weapon and not sacrificing all that much. The recoil control, as we talked about with the other barrel for the MP5, you can end up mitigating that with any sort of grip. Same thing with the bullet velocity. You're not really missing out on all that much unless you're trying to, say, cross-map somebody with it, which, of course, can be something you may situationally come in contact with, but probably not all that much. Definitely try that one if you're using an M4A1 class or any other weapon that has the short barrel offered if you're going for a more mobile setup. Next, I want to talk about the 4x hybrid magnification sight with this, and I use this on the M13. I don't know how many other weapons it's actually available on, but with the M13, this is a rifle that is a little more mobile to begin with, and is something that you kit it out properly, you can end up making it a very mobile weapon. But the big thing with all rifles is the ADS speed, how long it takes to get from your hip to aiming down sight, and the 4x hybrid actually helps that out. The pros here for this one is that you gain the magnification toggle and also a reflex and scout optic, depending on which one you have equipped at that time. You can end up changing it out with your left thumbstick, pressing that in, L3 I think it is, but you also end up getting an increase to that aim down sight speed, meaning that that hip fire to ADS is a little quicker than before, which is something that, of course, like I said, I always want, but this only sacrifices the zoom level of other optics, i.e. because you have that hollow variation, and the idle sway control, which, let's be honest, you probably aren't going to be idle that much, so the sway isn't going to be too much for you to handle. Now, if you're not necessarily too keen on just the run and gun playstyles, but want to play maybe a little bit more where you can move, but you just want a little bit more damage rather than sacrificing damage for mobility, one on rifles that is a great attachment to consider is that of the heavy-duty barrel. This being in the barrel section for this, I ended up running this on the M4A1, and that's probably the one that you recognize it the most from, but it offers an increase in that damage range plus the bullet velocity and only sacrifices a little bit of that aim down sight speed. So again, if you're not too worried about making it as fast a weapon loadout as possible to bring your weapon up to ADS, it might not be a bad thing to consider. If you don't want to overkill that aim down sight speed, this will definitely help because that damage range can add a little bit more to the effectiveness at a further distance with the M4. Same thing with that bullet velocity. So just a slight little trade-off, and depending on how you want to take the engagements and how your playstyle will really affect how you want to set up your loadout. That said, let's finish out this video here with 4 attachments that are just overall, or I guess 3 of these are actually perks. So attachments, I guess, is a word used lightly, but it is a part of the creator class and that weapon loadout. So just for the sake of keeping it all in the same place, firstly, I want to talk about probably one of the most effective that I end up running here at this, that being frangible wounding. This is found as a weapon perk on most weapons. We'll talk about the sort of adverse here to it, or a frangible perk found on a couple of other weapons. Before this, we end up having the frangible wounding perk, allowing us to inflict wounding damage to a player that is hit by our bullets. The bullets expelled from our weapon end up briefly disabling or delaying the regeneration of the enemy player's health, which is absolutely massive, especially given the fact that time to kill in this game is pretty quick with some weapons, and so therefore, if you can end up not getting that kill, but delaying it enough that you can push them for that regen not to get back in, that gives you the slight edge in most engagements. And same thing, it also kind of dooms them if they're running through, say, the street in raid. Chances are that they're gonna get hit once or twice by a stray bullet, so that'll help get you that assist and then help you get that extra score. That's honestly, if I have the spot for a weapon perk in a class setup, the one that I will always default to. There's other cool things, of course, like sleight of hand or fully loaded. As a player that loves ammo and having more than enough to utilize at a time, it's tempting, but I'll still take frangible wounding over all of that. Now, talking about, again, the adverse, or I guess very similarly to that, but not exactly, is that of frangible disabling, which is only on a few various weapons, but it offers a similar delaying effect, but it is something that will offer you crippling power, meaning that bullets will slow the enemy's movement and briefly disable their tactical sprint when shooting their legs. So it's kind of an anti-movement perk for your weapon, is something that definitely can, again, if you're hunting down an enemy, greatly help out your cause in trying to finish off that kill. Very situational, and again, not on every single weapon, but for the weapons that it is on, you probably won't have frangible wounding, so maybe throw that one on instead. As our penultimate weapon attachment here, or I guess weapon perk in this case, I want to talk a little bit about very default one that isn't a perk this year, but instead is a weapon perk, so you can have it equipped with your class, but not really have to sacrifice anything like scavenger, double time, or EOD, or anything like ghost or battle hardened in your perk selections, that being sleight of hand. This obviously just giving you extra reload quickness and doesn't sacrifice anything in return. That's the nice part about these perks, is there's no downside here to it that it will take away from it. It only adds to that weapon and that loadout you have built for yourself. Now, closing out the 10 attachments that I would recommend here at this is that of the vertical foregrip in the underbarrel section for most weapons. This allows you to have increased vertical recoil control while only sacrificing a little bit of movement speed overall. And realistically, to me, the vertical recoil is what I noticed drastically. A lot of the weapons do kick up quite a bit, so personally, not noticing much of the horizontal recoil, or at least naturally controlling it, I do notice the vertical, and so I want to mitigate that as much as possible. The movement speed, though, you don't sacrifice all that much at the cost of controlling your weapon further, so it's really not all that bad. You won't notice tremendously the movement speed compared to if you have it or if you don't, so don't worry too much about it. But said, that is where we're going to wrap it up. That is 10 attachments here that I think you guys should try out, and 10 of the best I think that we have at the very moment in the beta. Of course, as we end up seeing more weapons unlocked, more weapon levels increased as the full game comes out, and as we have our hands on for everything, we're going to be able to exceed weapon level 30 for rifles. We're going to be able to exceed weapon level 25 for SMGs. We're going to be able to exceed weapon level 20 for snipers, and so on and so forth. So this list may very well not be the definitive list that I'd give you, say, at launch and shortly thereafter, but for the time being, jumping into Modern Warfare in the beta right now, I would definitely recommend all of these. So that said, hopefully you enjoyed the video, hopefully it helped you out in some way, shape, or form, and hopefully it can help increase your play experience and the weapon loadouts you have available. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Is there anything in particular that you'd add or subtract from this list? Anything that you guys are very much so impressed by? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below, and of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare, all things relating to the beta and beyond. We'll keep you guys up to date with all that. So hit that subscribe button if you guys are new. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. But all that said and out of the way, thank you guys all so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.